I need some traction. You need some traction.
Hey everyone, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder at Boast AI. We're on a mission to help innovative companies become successful by giving them access to government funding and the resources they need to succeed. Today's Traction webinar is brought to you by Boast AI Launch Academy in partnership with Growth Blazers, Founder Institute, Lazarides Institute, and BCF Ventures. Folks, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A tab. Today's topic is an amazing one. It's about building and scaling your product to drive success at every phase of the customer journey. Oftentimes people think about customers as something you sell to, and they use your product, and that's the relationship. But really your customer journey with your company starts way before they sign up to become your customer. And there's multiple touch points along the way across multiple channels and route to them becoming a long-standing customer. And it's all about building that relationship with your customer. And our speaker today is an expert at that. Ryan Donovan is the CTO at Hootsuite, where he leads product, UX, software development, production operations, program management, and basically keeps the company going and innovating so that 21 million customers are happy. And prior to that, Ryan comes with more than 20 years experience running engineering at top tech companies like Sitecore and Microsoft. And Ryan's going to tell us all about how to build and scale products to drive customer success at every stage of your customer journey. Ryan, welcome to Traction. Thanks for joining us.
Lloyd, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I've been really looking forward to our chat.
Definitely. And, you know, before we jump in, I'd love to get your backstory. You've had a unique background across engineering and product across multiple successful companies. Tell us about your backstory and your journey to CTO at Hootsuite.
Yeah, so it has its roots at Microsoft. So back when I was at Microsoft, I started on Windows 2000, so that really dates me. And so as I grew up at Microsoft, they had this model they called product unit manager, general manager, where you had complete end-to-end accountability for products. And I quickly found myself rising into one of those roles. So I'm kind of unique in the sense that I've always owned product and engineering throughout my career. And I think one of the tricks of being successful is making sure that those two come together like a symphony orchestra. And so that's been a big part of the journey, and really where my DNA comes from was, you know, learning how Microsoft did things, you know, right at the beginning of my career.
Awesome. And what sort of led you to Hootsuite? Because you could have gone to a number of companies as a seasoned CTO and product leader. Why Hootsuite? Why this Canadian company?
Well, so one, I'm Canadian, and so I really wanted to work for another Canadian company. It had been a while. And the other thing too is Hootsuite's an iconic brand. And so when Ryan Holmes came calling, I couldn't not answer that call. And the third thing is that my skills were coming from Sitecore were very transferable, because you're solving a lot of the same digital marketing problems, but just in a different channel, social as opposed to web and mobile.
And we have a great connection with Ryan as well. Ryan was the first speaker we ever secured for Traction. He's been a great supporter, and Hootsuite is an iconic brand, and Ryan's a visionary. But Hootsuite is more than just social scheduling platform, right? I mean, Hootsuite is the leading social scheduling platform, but what don't we know?
Our portfolio's grown quite a bit over the years. So obviously our roots were in social scheduling and content management, but we then expanded into listening, into analytics, advertising. And then over the last 2 years, we've really been focusing much more deeply on social care and now social commerce. Because what's happened is when COVID happened, the amount of one-on-one brand customer interactions over social, it just exploded. And it's showing no signs of decelerating. And some of our own market research has shown that social is rapidly becoming the preferred, you know, messaging platform for brand and customer interactions.
And what is the most exciting product in your portfolio, you'd say, beyond the social scheduling?
I'd say right now it's Heyday.ai, our social commerce chatbot. Like if you look at how they're using artificial intelligence to really drive a social purchasing and post-sale care experience. It's a really amazing technology built by an incredible team in Montreal. I'm really excited to have them in the family now.
Definitely. That's fantastic. And so would you say then the big vision mission of Hootsuite is to own the customer journey end to end, to help companies own the customer journey?
Absolutely. So here's how we think about this. And we didn't invent this. Forrester Research actually did, which is they've defined a customer journey lifecycle. It has 6 phases in it. Social media is the only medium where you can actually touch a customer across all 6 phases. And the way we've been sculpting our product portfolio over the last 2 years has been really delivering on that promise.
Awesome. And so then let's start by telling us what is that customer journey? What is, and I guess what isn't a customer journey? And
Okay,
what are the phases within there?
So if we think about, if you are a really hyper mature brand, the first thing you need to think about is understanding your audience. And so being able to go out there, look at sentiment, understanding who your customers are today, as well as what do they look like, so that you can then find the right prospective customers tomorrow. Then you need to actually build that audience, and that's going to come through a mix of organic content and then paid content. And paid social is a really efficient means to really get the right content in front of the right people, because let's be honest, most of us have signed away many of our life secrets on social media. And then, once you've got them, you've got to get them into a conversation. You got to start engaging them. And that's how you can then turn them into customers and possibly even transact over social. But then once they're our customer, you've got to take care of them and then be able to be there and deliver a great experience when they need help, post-transaction. And then the last phase of it is actually, hopefully turning them into an advocate, so that they're going out and telling all their friends and family what a great job that our experience they had with you. And then it just feeds the virtuous circle over and over and over again. And as you can hopefully see through that kind of narrative, that social media definitely has a key role to play at all of those phases.
Definitely. That sounds exciting. Let's deep dive maybe into some of these phases in line with how do you develop a sort of customer journey? You're a company, you're starting out, or maybe you're refocusing. How do you define the key touch points along the way?
Okay, so the first thing I think you need to do is think about the jobs to be done. Like, what are the jobs that your customer is trying to do that your product or service is going to address? You got to work backwards. There's a great book, Working Backwards, tells how Amazon does this, but that's really the core principle. It's not rocket science, but you really have to dissect that. Then once you understand what it is your customers are trying to do, then that's where you start to think about, well, how do I service that? What products or services can I offer to do that? And then how good a job am I actually delivering that? And that's where you can start to use qualitative and quantitative data like NPS or customer effort score to really unpack that, or use, a product-led growth framework like Reforge to really say, all right, this is the journey we want our customers to be going. How effectively are we driving our customers down that journey? Where are the friction points or points of abandonment? And then really zeroing in on those things. And then that becomes helps to drive your product roadmap and your UX roadmap along the way. And
at Hootsuite, is that a framework you've adopted, and how have you implemented that?
Yeah, so when I joined Hootsuite, first took a step back to just understand the portfolio, the addressable market behind each of them, and the growth, retention, things like that. And a couple of things really stood out, which is one, the bulk of Hootsuite had invested a lot in performance marketing, but that's a category that was actually shrinking because it's being cannibalized by free tools from the social networks themselves. It also wasn't a core user persona, which was a digital marketer. And then when we started to unpack what our customers were doing, we discovered that as marketing became successful care started to factor into the equation more heavily. COVID, of course, accelerated that quite a bit. And then we started to say, all right, well, what's the next chapter? And that was clearly commerce, because if we just work backwards in that customer journey, those were the missing pieces. And so we put together a product strategy, towards the end of 2019 that really started focusing on let's really own the marketing use case, and then let's go shopping for care. And that's what drove the acquisition of Spark Central. And then as we really got into Spark Central, that really kind of pointed us in the direction of, hey, there's a really key component for AI, and that same, if we start thinking about Venn diagram overlap, there's also a really good component for conversational AI when it comes to commerce, and that's what really drove the acquisition of Heyday. So it was really, deliberate work that we started 2 years ago that kind of led to the first acquisition, and then the first acquisition kind of nicely dovetailed into the second to complete the portfolio that we have today, which is really 3 key pillars: marketing, care, and commerce.
So let's say a customer starts with their journey mapping, right? Maybe it's a Hootsuite client, or maybe it's not. What are some of the things they have to consider, along for those each phases you talked about, the 6 phases? And maybe we start by summarizing those phases you talked about.
Building awareness, to engagement, to transaction, to care, to advocacy.
To advocacy, exactly. So what, I guess, maybe with Hootsuite, without Hootsuite, for each of those buckets or those steps, what are some best practices that you've seen? And advocacy being sort of customer nirvana for every company, right?
Absolutely. So I'm actually going to go back to some of Forrester's research, because they do some great work in this space. They said that what was really scary is that they said that most brands only get 2 of the 6 channels right, and oftentimes not in a holistic manner, especially as it comes to social media. So the advice I'd give to any of our customers when I talk to our clients is, let's start to think about that entire journey holistically. Then where are the gaps? And then what are the priorities of the gaps? And then come up with strategies to actually, plug them in. And it can be any one use case. Like, one of my favorite customers that I talk to quite regularly is the UK Ministry of Defense. And you'd be thinking well, what the heck are they doing with a tool like Hootsuite? But they're using it in a couple innovative ways. One of the ways they're doing it is engaging with local communities around the UK military bases. And so building a positive relationship with local communities. They're using it to educate, and that's really being driven at a local level. They're also using it on both a local and a national level to say, all right, here's where your tax dollars are going and the value it's going to bring you back as a citizen. And then they're showcasing their own people as a recruitment tool to help drive, the next generation of soldiers in the British Armed Forces. And so, that's a very atypical use case, but they've really done a good job of thinking about this holistically and how to do it. They also did a lot of experimentation and had some spectacular fails along the way. I remember one of the stories they shared with me was doing a live stream of a ship arriving, and they're that really wasn't that interesting at the end of the day.
Definitely. No, that's very interesting. And when you look at your customer journey, so first you map that, right? All the touch points, you talk about the different phases. How do you start to think about where to bring in technology along the way?
Well, the best thing you can do is instrument everything from an analytics perspective and really dive into that, because that's where you're going to start to see the things to fall off. And because you should really start that all the way with your paid user acquisition. Then as people get into your website, then as they sign up with your tool, then as they start to use the tool, you really want to find those points of abandonment along the way and figure out how to optimize those. And so analytics is absolutely the key to success here. Even if you're in a high touch, enterprise-driven model, the data you get watching, your user funnels is still extremely insightful.
Definitely, and I think if you can't grow if you don't measure. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done.
Exactly.
Can you I guess I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but perhaps walk us through that journey map for Hootsuite or a customer all the way. Like, hey, this is where the engagement starts. These are the tools we use, kind of thing. If you could, would be
Yeah, I mean,
immensely valuable.
the way we think about the journey starts the minute you click on a link that brings you to our website, and that probably came up as a result of something that you Googled or Binged or something along those lines. Then we really try to start to identify, like, what problems are you looking to solve, get you in front of the right products and offerings. Then either if it's one of our more advanced capabilities, get you talking to one of our people, or if it's one of our self-serve offerings, get you into actually using the product. And then once we get you into using the product, then that's when we're going to help you become more of an expert practitioner and user of the product. So that's a mix of things like in-product help, user experience, our Hootsuite Academy, which is one of the best resources out there on how to become a social practitioner. So they've got tons of best practices that aren't even specific to like our products, and really kind of leverage that flywheel along the way.
Definitely. And sort of, what are some mistakes you've seen companies make as they map this out, or what are some pitfalls to watch out for?
I think that one is you've got to have a good journey map model put together. Like we early on in my time here at Hootsuite, we started to actually sit down and define those things, and then really map that back to like, what are the customer problems, and then connect all the dots. And oftentimes you see the customer disconnects between the customer job to be done, the product, and then the positioning around the product is where you see significant mismatches. And the sooner you can tune those things to fill those gaps across the board, the more successful you're going to be.
Definitely. And I love this jobs to be done framework. I don't know if it was Clayton Christensen who started it, but like the thesis or the philosophy of customers want an outcome. They don't want software. They don't want products. They want a specific job done, and your job as a company is to deliver them that outcome, and working backwards from that is key here. Do you use the product yourself, Hootsuite?
Oh, every day. Every social post I make, and actually for several years, even before Hootsuite, I was a paying Hootsuite customer before I ever got the call.
Amazing. And what use cases do you use it for?
Well, when I was at Sitecore, I was one of the de facto spokespersons for the company, and so I was like, okay, I've got to be managing my social presence more effectively. So I'm like, I'm going to use a tool, and Hootsuite was by far the best. Hootsuite Pro is by far the best thing I found from researching it. And then as I came, and that's why when I got the call, I was like, this is a no-brainer. I'm already using the product.
Definitely. And so, across your journey map, you guys use Hootsuite. What other tools you use to facilitate that end-to-end customer journey?
Numerous different analytics tools. Some are off the shelf, like things that you'd use on our website, but some are more specific, or some are things that we've developed internally. Like, for example, we feed a lot of our own analytics off of our own event bus, for example, because we're just processing so many events. We also use commercial third-party tools, and so it's a mix of the above. But yeah, we have a significant investment in data technology inside the company. Because,
like, when you're trying to orchestrate multi-channel engagement that addresses the buying needs of customers and prospects, you're like integrating multiple different tools. You're buying stuff, you're building stuff, and you're also perhaps acquiring companies to do that. How do you think about that, actually, build versus buy versus integrate?
So I think that first thing, build should be kind of your last resort. Like that's because that's always going to be the most expensive and take the most. And
when you say build, meaning, I mean, for internal purposes or sort of part of your product?
I'm going to start with internal purposes, and I'll shift to product.
Okay.
So internal purposes, you always want to buy, if there's something great off the shelf, by all means, buy it, integrate it, like don't try and reinvent the likes of Google Analytics. Like that's probably not a very good idea. And then, for external, it really comes down to first, the way I think about building products is something that we're going to build truly unique. Is there nothing else out there that we can go partner or buy? Or do we think that we've got a thesis that we can solve a problem in a uniquely differentiated way that nobody else can? And so, like we've got a product that's under development right now that we built entirely on our own because we looked and said, okay, there's nobody that's doing this way. We see a huge opportunity for unique value add, and so we decided to build that. Next thing we want to do is the way we think about buy versus partners. If there's something out there that solves the problem, is there a mutually beneficial business relationship, or is there going to be some type of strained competitive dynamic over time? And if the answer is there's a long-term mutually beneficial relationship, then we go ahead and partner with those. And that's where you see us partner with a lot of the big tech players like Adobe or Microsoft or someone like that, because like, be honest, we don't want to be in the business of competing with either one of them, but we can certainly do some interesting things together that make our products work together really, really well. Like for example, being able to consume content from Adobe Experience Manager to post out on social, or being able to integrate Hootsuite Analytics with Adobe Analytics, there's a lot of power in that. And then we look at, is this something that we really want to own? In which case we look at that. And so like in the case of the Spark Central acquisition, we said we really want to own one-on-one messaging in social care. And we looked at what it was going to take to build it. We looked at Spark Central, said, okay, we can shave a couple of years off of our roadmap here by buying Spark Central. And so that was how we arrived at that decision. And then as we were integrating that, that's when conversational AI came up, and that's what led us to the Heyday acquisition.
How does the conversational AI fit in? Because I'm mostly familiar with like the variety of chatbots like the intercoms and the drifts on your website. So how does that fit into this whole sort of social marketing experience?
Okay, so let's imagine. I'll just give you the customer journey as we're thinking about it. I, as a brand, have gotten you to my presence on social media because I either saw something, you either saw something in your feed organically, or you clicked on a targeted ad that, we put out there. But then you want to chat to learn more. And that's where Heyday comes into play, because that can integrate with your commerce platforms like a Shopify or Salesforce Commerce, and then answer all of the easy questions about the product or service for you. And then it can route you through to a human being when you have the really high value questions that only a true expert could answer. And then if need be, even close the deal and do the conversion in the midst of social. And then once you need help after the fact, you come back again, go through chat. The AI is going to help you with all of the easy questions like, where's my package? Am I going to have to pay duty on this? What's your, or I need help with the product. Do that. And then when you need to get through to a human being, then that's when we'll use Spark Central to actually route you through to the right expert. It's like, that's one of Spark Central's special sauces, is they've got really deep routing capabilities so that the right person is actually answering the question.
This is amazing, because you know what one of the earlier projects in my life that I built was a chatbot built on top of Zendesk that intelligently responded and routed. That miserably failed because we didn't have the tech chops. But I think the concept has taken off, and I love this take on how Hootsuite's bringing it in. I've seen, so you're saying these sort of chatbots live on companies' websites powered by Hootsuite.
They can live on websites, they can live in a social channel, they can live in a mobile channel, because the reality is that we're taking a pretty multi-channel. It can even be in an interactive ad, because Google now allows chatbots to be embedded in advertisements.
That's amazing. I hadn't even thought that some of these tools existed, and again, leveraging like a sort of like a Facebook Messenger or any sort of social backend to power
Absolutely, because I mean, if you think about Mark Zuckerberg's F8 keynote, I think it was a year and a half ago where he said the future of social is all about messaging. If you look at the trends and what's happened with COVID, it's absolutely, his predictions are absolutely coming true. I mean, the amount of one-on-one interactions we've seen from a messaging perspective is just spiked and is climbing and showing no signs of abating. And I can tell you, I'll throw myself into that camp. I much prefer dealing with a chat-based experience than having to like physically pick up the phone. And I know because I had to go through changes to my mobile plans on both my US and my Canadian cell phone. And Bell Canada had a chat experience. It was great. I was able to do this while multitasking. It didn't take me out of my day. T-Mobile doesn't have a chat experience anymore after they merged with Sprint. And that was 2 hours out of my life. I'm never going to get back.
Over the weekend, I had to go into a T-Mobile store because I dropped my old iPhone in the water, so I know all about it. And what's intriguing here is Hootsuite sort of feels like you went from I still use the product, by the way. I have a Hootsuite account, from social scheduling to touching across every piece of the buyer's journey. I want to touch on two more things here. One is, how does Hootsuite enable or expedite lead generation? And then the second thing is advocacy, because that's the nirvana everyone wants, turning your customers into advocates.
Yeah, so a couple things. So obviously paid social is a great way to do lead gen. And so, and so that's obviously a great best practice to do it. When you think about advocacy, we actually approach the advocacy problem from two different ways. One of which is we've got listening solutions to help understanding the organic advocacy or lack thereof, like finding somebody that's tweeting because they had a good experience with your company. So you can find those, so you can hunt those people down to turn them into deeper advocates. But the other way we do it is employee advocates, because that's something that's really underrepresented. And the organizations that have figured this out are producing amazing results, because the number one most trusted, face of a brand is somebody that somebody knows. And so we actually have a whole product built for that. It's called Amplify, and organizations that are using this product to turn their employees into advocates, which then helps them, generate leads. For example, we have large insurance company. They've rolled out this tool very successfully to all of their insurance agents in the field, and they're being very successful at building local relationships using social media.
Definitely. That's some great advice. I want to dive into product and building and scaling product and engineering teams. I mean, we talked about customer journey, how to think about your customer journey mapping and enable technology along the way to drive that end-to-end outcome of long-term customer advocates. Now, dive into product. Hootsuite is a product-led company. You mentioned product-led a couple times at the beginning. What are the key traits of success in product-led? I think Hootsuite started as product-led. Now you have an enterprise motion as well. But what are the key traits there?
Well, I think that the key trait is that you have is that we have a freemium model, and that you can actually sign up, become effective with Hootsuite all on your own. Like, that's the ultimate manifestation of product-led growth, is you can self-activate customers using your product. And that was a decision that was made really early on, and it still bears incredible fruits in our 12th, soon to be 13th year of existence. And so that's something you should think about. And that's something that we think about all the time, which is how can we push more of these capabilities down? How can we better educate and empower our customers to use the product so that they graduate to our more advanced features. And so that's where, as you think about this, once you get that flywheel going, you've got to then think about a maturity model along the way. And then how do you progress your customers up through that maturity model? So like what we go from like a casual user to a core user to a power user. And we've got, for example, definitions of these. And that's what our user education team and our user experience teams are very focused on, which is how do we get people graduating up that maturity scale? Because when you get to the power user, you're going to need and want all the things. And we're also always thinking about how do we take capabilities and bring them down to a self-serve customer as opposed to being a capability that you need to go through a more traditional sales motion to buy.
Definitely. And you've had experience across both sales-led companies and product-led companies, right?
Absolutely.
What do you prefer? I guess what is easier, sales-led or product-led?
Product-led, because you're in charge of your product roadmap destiny, and the number of I'll say the number of customer-driven detours gets minimized. It allows you to have a focused strategy and stick to it.
Definitely. But like it's a whole organizational shift, right? Moving from like a sales-led to a product-led, or even adding sales-led. I guess adding sales-led on top of product-led is easier because once you show the sales team how you're qualifying leads and passing them the right enterprises, they end up loving you. But the other way is difficult. Have you any advice for transitioning from a sales-led to a product-led organization? What are some things to think about, keep in mind?
The biggest thing to think about is if you want to make a successful transition, you got to go back and look at where are there customer interruptions in the roadmap and why are those interruptions happening? You got to unpack and get to the underlying root cause of that. So, and oftentimes you'll need to think about, okay, maybe I need to make a systemic, substantial investment to kind of remove these categories of interruptions. And it's not the onesie twosies, like somebody wants to change to a dialogue. It's like, okay, where are we diverting, multiple sprints times your entire team level of resources, and get in front of those things. Or else say, the other alternative is that if you don't think you can make that go away because maybe you're in a somewhat bespoke category, how can you start adding APIs and shifting that burden of those customizations to partners that can build off of your APIs, as opposed to having to take those roadmap considerations into account in the core product? Because partner leverage models also work really, really, really well. Like that was one of the secrets of Sitecore's success, is the fact that they have an incredibly passionate developer partner community that does a lot of those customizations, so that allowed Sitecore to stay focused on kind of its core product vision and journey.
Definitely. That's great advice. I was typing this note here, is identify, if you want to move from sales-led to product-led, identify where the customer interruptions in the roadmap are and why they are happening, and then work to remove that friction in the
and either have to address it functionally, you have to address it via APIs, or if you find yourself in the worst case scenario, because there are for sure categories out there where the worst case scenario manifests itself, which is you can't get away from the customer distractions, maybe because you're doing something that's really, really verticalized or specialized. Well, if that's the case, you almost have to structure your team so that you've got enough teams to focus on innovation and strategic direction, and enough teams to then just deal with the influx of customer requests.
Definitely. And then sometimes it's a sort of mindset shift, right? If you're a sales-led organization, salespeople are used to running a certain way, and product and engineering is often a stepchild and afterthought, right? Like, oh, we go and sell this, you guys build stuff. How do you shift? Any advice for shifting that mindset so everyone thinks like product-led, product first?
Well, so a lot of what you got to do is invest a lot of the time enabling your sales force to say, all right, here's what we've got, here's why it's cool, here's why it matters, here's how we think you should go sell this, and then be good partners in the journey, and really help them. But it does take a lot of, I'll say, internal evangelism to your sales force. And so like in past lives, like Microsoft did this probably better than any company I've ever seen, where they'd have a huge kickoff in a place like New Orleans, where it was, it was like a week of just product teams at different levels of scale and intimacy, just rallying Microsoft's entire field sales organization. I know I used to be excited and fearful of all of my annual trips to someplace very hot and humid in the middle of the summer to go rally the troops.
And basically what I'm hearing is lots of carrots, no sticks.
Yeah, exactly. And you also got to show that you're being receptive to feedback. So like have programs that show that customer feedback and sales feedback is being actioned. The other thing you can also do too, to help really encourage your sales, is build as a product team, build up a mass of competitive intelligence and get that in the hands of your sellers, because that shows that you're really doing all things in the right direction. But good comp intel, good internal evangelism. It takes a lot of work, but that's how you can make your sellers your best friends.
Definitely. That's fantastic advice there. What is your recommended product development framework or the framework at Hootsuite that you guys follow?
So we use, I'll say, a highly customized version of Scaled Agile principles. Like I think Scaled Agile is probably the best way to operate at scale without tripping over yourselves. But most people view Scaled Agile, especially if you look at the training and the certifications, they view it as an absolute. And that's where I think most Scaled Agile programs fail, is that it's not an absolute. There's an art to it. And you have to, and the way to make it successful is to make your teams own it and tailor it and customize it in a way that works for them. So both Sitecore and Hootsuite, we've rolled out flavors of Scaled Agile. The teams really made it themselves. And like, I don't even like to call what we do at Hootsuite Scaled Agile, because it's really quite tailored to like a lot of the unique nuances of like rapid API changes from social networks and things like that. But that's probably the best way, but as long as you use it as advice and guidance versus we're going to do this by the book, and which is what the training courses will tell you, that's probably the best advice I would have, to actually have teams that can work together and not conflict with one another.
It would be great to get an example of this in motion, like from prioritizing to assigning resources to shipping. Like, how does it all work? Is it similar to a Scrum model? What is
so you can think of Scaled Agile as Scrum model, but you've got a planning interval where all the teams come together to resolve dependencies and just make sure that the worldview, all the pieces actually add up together to hit the desired sum total. In terms of prioritization, the framework that I think is the most effective is the RICE framework. This stands for Reach, Impact, Confidence, and Effort. And it basically allows you to score your backlog based on the amount of customer impact it's going to have and the amount of effort it's going to take. And it really helps you. You'll never end up with like 3 pry ones. With a RICE framework, you'll know which is the more important pry one if you're using it properly.
And where have you seen things break down in these frameworks?
I think if there's not enough discipline around prioritization and you end up with like too many pry zeros or too many pry ones, that's where it breaks. That's why we adopted RICE, as we were using P0 through like P3, P4, and we had definitions of them, but we were ending up with like too many of them. And it's like, okay, we can't have this many P0s, folks. Something is surely more important than something else.
And what is the key element in that RICE that makes it all?
It really comes down to looking at the true trade-off between customer impact and effort, because like it'll help you balance, doing something that's going to take tons of work but have very little visible impact versus something that you could get out there tomorrow that's going to delight a bunch of people.
In terms of your team now at Hootsuite, how big is the organization, the product and engineering organization?
Prior to heyday, we were just in the mid 400s, and but now added a bunch of new colleagues in Montreal. It's a big geographically distributed teams. We're spread out between Vancouver, now a number of remote workers elsewhere in Canada, Toronto, Milan, Rome, Bucharest, and Brussels, and just outside of the Brussels area. It's in a town called Hasselt, which is about a 40-minute train ride outside of Brussels.
So now way north of 600 people in the product management.
I can't comment on specifics, but you can get the idea that we've got a pretty good sized team.
Yeah, and how is the team structured? Any recommendations for the ideal team structure? Because oftentimes we'll see like that cross-functional collaboration becomes harder and harder as you grow. So what is like, do you guys have pods? Like what is your recommendation?
We have the notion of an agile team, which is typically 5 to 7 developers, a leader that's paired up with a product person, a design person, and then with liaisons for security and user education.
That's awesome. And who's, I guess, the key holder there? Who makes the shoe drop in each of those teams?
Well, at the end of the day, it's really got to be a combination of the product, the design, and the software development leaders got to agree, or if it doesn't, it gets pushed up. And if it still doesn't agree, then it might find its way to my desk. Fortunately, those conflicts are very few and far between.
Definitely. And you've built a massive team, you've built massive teams. Any tips on sourcing great talent that you've picked up along the way?
So I'll say, thanks to COVID, going distributed first has been honestly one of the biggest wins, because we've picked up amazing folks in other parts of Canada they're phenomenal additions to the team. Like we've picked up a number of folks in Ottawa, we've picked up a number of folks in Alberta that we probably wouldn't have otherwise come across. So that's been, I think, one of the biggest wins from a recruitment perspective is embracing that distributed first mindset. And I think my advice to anyone starting out today is build your company that way from the very beginning, because it will just because you've got very successful companies like WordPress, Automatic, which is the parent company of WordPress, that have always been that way. And I think that's a great way, especially when you're a smaller organization, to help get the best and brightest talent that's in the market, and take yourself away from some of the, I'll say, Shark Tank competition with big tech, which is what's going to happen if you're trying to build a team in any big tech hub city.
Definitely. And but with all this remote and managing like hundreds of people globally, communication becomes a challenge, right? How do you manage asynchronous communication?
You got to have the right tool set. So like, for example, internally, we use a mix of Google Workspace, Slack, and the Atlassian suite to keep everything together.
Definitely. That's great advice. And any challenges you see? I mean, like it's sort of the water cooler doesn't exist anymore. How have you accommodated for sort of collisions or random?
So we've had to consciously invest in, I'll say, stuff that's cool and fun to do as teams, so that you've got that social team building. So we do hackathons. We've got what we call the Owl Together program, which is just distributed social events and master classes and various different things. We encourage virtual team socials, and now as COVID's hopefully starting to get on the wane, we're going to encourage people to get together within their local areas, but do so in a in a manner that's in accordance with whatever the local guidelines happen to be. Largely probably like a picnic. Like one of the things I heard being talked about was like a picnic at a park. And so we got to start to do that. I do think it's going to be important to bring people together on a regular basis, so that there's at least a couple of face-to-face meetings per year once it's actually safe to do so.
With managing hundreds of people, there's also signs of bad communication you've probably seen. What are some signs of bad communication, and how have you overcome them, or how can we overcome them?
I think you have to do a lot of listening and really unpack things. So a lot of roundtables, a lot of skip levels, things like that, to really get to the heart of what people are doing. Like I spend a lot of my time doing skip levels just to and kind of in roundtables just to let people, get a leadership audience so that if there is a wire that's crossed, we can hopefully get it on the path to uncross it. I think leaders also have to be very open and approachable. So like everybody knows that they can reach out to me and I'll try to get back to them that day.
So although you have this pod structure and there's some level of hierarchy, it's still flat in terms of reaching out to you.
Yeah, it's like somebody's got a great idea or they're blocked on something. It's like bring it up to your senior leader, bring it up to me. Try to encourage all the leaders to have it to be very open and approachable.
I think like ultimately openness is the most indispensable enabler of growth. And so it seems like you're getting this unfiltered feedback without any barriers along the way. Have you like leveraged any tools or processes to make sure that's happening at all times? We
do regular employee surveys, and we use a survey tool for that. That's the other way to kind of get stuff that's out there that people aren't bringing up organically.
And are those typically anonymous or not anonymous?
They're anonymous. Like you can see, at the department level, but they're fully anonymized so that you can't identify individuals unless they call themselves out.
And my last question here is, how do you train your organization to make better decisions when you're not in the room?
I think you've got to have a North Star. So in all things product and technology, that North Star is the customer. And that's why we love the RICES framework, because it pushes the things that matter the most to the top. And so whenever faced with the trade-off, it's like, which one's going to have the better RICE score? And that's maybe the one you should choose and prioritize. Conversely, build a customer first mindset that when an issue does arise, we're going to be the fastest organization in the world at resolving that issue.
Definitely. And there's a ton of models, but this makes sense, right? Because you're calculating the reach, impact, and the confidence and effort into account. All starts by that reach is how many people are going to be impacted by this release. Without the customer, you have no business. This is fantastic. Some parting thoughts here. What is a key learning you've taken away from this past year? I mean, you work in a global organization, huge demands on your schedule. What is the one thing you've taken away, personal or professional?
I would say at a personal level, especially as we're all distributed, making sure you've got all of the channels open for getting feedback and making sure that people are feeling heard, and that you take more time. If I could go back and look at the last, since COVID hit, and all, as you put it, all the water cooler discussions went away. Because I used to have tons of interesting chats in line while waiting to get coffee, because it seems like there's always a queue, and I always wanted more coffee. It really comes down to more listening, more dialogue.
Definitely. We can all listen a little more, more dialogue. As you look back on your journey, though, what do you wish you did more of, and what do you wish you did less of?
I think that if I go look at my entire career, I would say really focus on product things that are going to move the needle versus just and really zero in on those things. I mean, there's obviously don't just check boxes or chase analyst reports. Really go for those big needle moving things, because analysts, that's just, at the end of the day, that's just one person's opinion that happens to work for Gartner or Forrester. Yes, it's backed up by research, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be right. My famous Henry Ford quote was, if you ask customers, they would have asked for a faster horse, not a car.
I say that all the time. I abuse it a little more. But in terms of that needle mover, how do you define what's a needle mover? Like
something that's going to have a huge reach impact. If you look at the RICE score format, it's going to be something that's going to be off the charts from a reach perspective, and something that you have high confidence that you can do it, even if it might be a really big bet. Like that, those are the things that become new products. And and like, I can't talk about it today, but we've got some very cool new stuff that I can't wait to be able to talk about it when I can.
Definitely. And any parting wisdom here in terms of like books, podcasts? Where do you get your knowledge?
I'm a voracious reader. I'm always reading. I try to be reading one business book at all times. And so, things that I've read in the last 12 months, product-led organization, measures that matter, brave new work, just a couple random selection, product-led growth. That was a really good one. Monetizing innovation. Those are probably all books I've read this summer.
Some product-led growth. I'm going to summarize it after the fact. Where can we find you on social? Are you active on social? I mean, you run a social media company.
Oh, I'm quite active. So you can find me. I've got my own page on Facebook. You can find me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. I also am an amateur photographer, so you'll also find me doing that on Instagram. And then to test out Hootsuite products, I've also got a Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram account for our two long-haired dachshunds, Walter and Sydney.
That's amazing. Talk about dog fooding your own product, and you got to be passionate about social and interactions to actually do it, or else it becomes a job, right?
Yeah, because anything I do on my own profiles is probably work related, is probably some way work related, but I get to have fun with the dogs and try stuff out.
That's amazing. Fantastic advice here on customer journey, building products, scaling engineering teams. Thank you so much, Ryan. I had a great time. I learned a ton. I took a bunch of notes here. Ryan, thank you so much. Wishing you great success.
Lloyd, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.